Welcome to the following video where we're going to look at putting different states on our button so that when I roll over and I click, we have different visuals to let us know that this is a button. So opening the file that I created last time, I just have my button fade in. This button is a movie clip and I named it BTN_MC up here in the instance name. Again, I can name this whatever I like. I just have to name it something so that I can talk to it from a certain point of view. I'm going to double click now into my movie clip. So if I click once on my graphic, it reveals the movie clip. If I double click, look carefully in my timeline. So right here in my timeline, I have the fading in button over 30 frames and then it stops. Once I double click into my movie clip, you're going to see I have a whole new timeline. And up here, you're going to see I'm no longer in scene 1, I'm in my button. So this means that I have a whole other timeline to create some animation in. I look at this kind of like an engine of a car. You're going to have an engine that turns the wheels, and that engine also turns other gears at different speeds. So really, I have the ability here to create kind of like a secondary engine that's going to help me make my button. So I'm going to elaborate. So on my first keyframe, I have my button. I'm going to insert a new layer. So this layer 1, I'm going to call normal. Layer 2, I'm going to call over. And now on my layer 2, I'm going to drag my over button onto stage. And I'm going to make sure that it's at the right spot. So it looks kind of funny now because I'm in the movie clip and it gives me kind of like a faded gray background, but it'll look fresh in a sec. So on layer 2, I have my normal over state. On layer 1, I have my normal. I'm just going to click and drag my normal state above my over. And I'm going to move my over state. I'm going to click once and I'm going to move it over to my frame 2. So now on frame 1, I have my normal state. On frame 2, I have my over. I'm going to insert a third layer and I'm going to call this down. I'm going to go to my down icon and I'm going to drag it over on layer 3. I'm going to drag it into place. And you're going to see Flash gives me kind of like these nice guides. It snaps it into place. And I'm going to make that keyframe on my third frame. So if you look, I have 3 frames. And on each frame, I have a different image. So I have my normal state, I have my over, and then I have my down. So I have 3 separate layers with 3 separate images on 3 separate frames. So the last thing I need to do here, just in this movie clip, I'm going to create one more new layer. I'm going to call this action. And I'm going to open my actions panel, just like we did in the previous exercise. So I can right click and go action, or I can go window actions, and it's going to open up the panel. And I'm just going to write stop. So that means that it's going to stop at the normal state at keyframe 1. We're going to implement code in a sec that when I hover over my button, it's going to go to frame 2. And when I click down on my button, it's going to go to frame 3. So let's go back to the scene now. I do that by clicking right here on my scene 1, or I can double click anywhere except for on the images themselves. So I'll just go back to my scene, and you're going to see it brings back up my main timeline. And just to re-illustrate, if I double click on my movie clip, you're going to see I have a separate timeline with three separate frames. So now if I go Control Test Movie, quick key Control Enter, you're going to see I just have my button that fades in. Nothing too wild yet. And you're going to see that I have a stop function on my first keyframe in my button timeline. Just to show an example, if I was to remove this and hit Control Enter, you're going to see it cycle through the 3 states. So that's not what I want. So I'm going to put the stop back there. All right. So I'm going to go now, and I'm going to start adding some code. So on my actions layer is where all my code's going to be found. I'm going to select my first keyframe, and I'm going to add all my code at the start here because it's just better. You're going to see that Flash can handle code in different manners, but in this case, I'm just going to put it at the start, and it's called event handling. So let's just learn the basics and put our code at the start. So code in Flash looks something like this. I named my button btn_MC. So I'm going to start with that. And I do that because this is targeting my movie clip. Then I'm going to add a dot, and I'm going to add what is called an event listener. Bracket, bracket, semicolon. So this is adding kind of like an ear. It's listening for something to happen. In my case, the event that I want to happen is going to be a mouse event, and it's going to be a mouse down. So my first one's going to be mouse over. So that means when I hover over my button MC, Flash is going to realize that. What it's going to do when I hover over, I'm going to add a comma, I'm going to call this my over function. I can name this function whatever I want, but I just have to remember the name. So what this line of code is saying, I'm just going to reorganize my workspace. So if you get kind of your windows messed up just like I did, I can go to workspace reset essentials, and it's going to reset my my workspace, and I'm just going to reopen my actions layer. Okay. So I have a button that has an over function. That over function I named over function. So whenever you see a semicolon in code, as I've explained before, it means it's the end of this line. This is a complete line of code. It doesn't need anything else. So I'm going to go to a new line. I skipped one. That's okay. I'm just going to do that to kind of show the example and keep it clean. So this is a complete separate thought. I'm going to create a function. I named my function up here over function. Again, I could name this anything I want. I could name my button underscore MC anything I want, as long as I just keep it consistent. My over function is a mouse event. So my function is an event, and I said above it was a mouse event. And then now I'm going to open my function with a curly brace, and I'm going to close my function with a curly brace. So that means that anything in between my open curly brace and my closed curly brace is my function. So the first function we're going to look at here is called trace. This just alerts me that something is happening. So this is the most basic way of debugging code and creating, it's just the easiest way of starting to create a button. So basically what's happening now is my over function is a mouse event, and whenever I go over my button, it's going to trace hit. It's really, that's just an alert. We've all seen alerts like online when you don't have a form filled out right and it says you forgot to put your first name. That's the same thing as we're doing here. We're tracing. We're just really alerting that something has happened. So before I just remembered it doesn't have to have the word event in front. I just have to say that it's a mouse event like that. So now when I run this function, I'm going to go control test movie. So I'm going to publish my movie and it's going to open it up. Now you're going to see when I roll over the button with my arrow, it's going to trace hit. So if you see in my output down here, it traced the word hit. This is just a simple way of debugging, letting me know that my button is in fact working. This is your first step, making sure that your code is listening to what you want it to do. So this output right here, no one sees this. This is just for you to test things. Sometimes you're going to want to trace mathematical equations, or you're going to want to trace results, or you're going to want to trace how things are loaded, or there's so many things that you're going to want to trace. So now instead of tracing hit, I want it to go to my frame 2. Like I want it, when I hover, I want it to go to this frame in my movie clip, in my button movie clip. So how I would do that is, so instead of trace hit, I'm going to put my btn underscore MC, and now I'm going to make it go to and stop my frame 2 of my movie clip. So I have a bracket and a bracket, and whatever number here I put in, that's my frame number, and then I end it with a semicolon. That means that this line of code is complete. So what this code means, inside my movie clip, go to and stop frame 2 once I hover over. So let's go to control test movie, and let's see if that works. So now when I go over this, it shows me my hover, and that's what I want. So now I'm just going to take this code, I'm going to copy it, hit enter, and then I'm going to paste it. So what I want now is my button movie clip. I'm going to add an event listener. Instead of mouse over, I'm going to put mouse down. And the function I want to trigger, I have to change the name, because if not, it would trigger this function. I'm going to make it trigger my down function. I'm just going to rename here my function to down. And I want it to do the same thing, go to my button movie clip, but I don't want it to stop on frame 2. I want it to stop on frame 3. Now I'm going to paste that code again, and then I'm going to have a button, and it's an event listener, and I'm going to put, instead of mouse over, I'm going to put mouse out, and then here I'm going to put an out function, And here I'm going to rename this out. And then I'm going to make it go to and play frame 1. So that means when I roll out of my button, it's going to go back to my normal state. So we really have 3 main kind of things happening here. I have an over event listener with a function. I have a mouse down event listener with a function. And I have a mouse out listener with a function. So now if I go to test my movie, which is quick key control enter, it's going to fade in my button. I can close my output. When I go over it, it goes to my over. When I click on it down with my mouse, it goes to down. When I move out, it returns to normal. So over, down, out.